This presentation represents my journey so far into the world of blended learning. I'll be sharing my experiences teaching in a blended environment, as well as some examples of my class and some helpful tips for both teachers and students. For teachers, I think that the biggest tip that I could have is to keep an open mind and not be afraid to try new things. It was very important to me to make this change. I wanted to come up with new ways to teach, new ways to motivate, and I realized that I could not do it without being willing to experiment and to make mistakes with new technologies that I was not familiar with. Another very important tip, I think, is to keep things simple. I wanted to do it all at once, and I quickly learned that that was not going to be possible. So starting with just a few changes is probably the best way to go, and implementing those changes until you're comfortable with them before you move on to something new. For any use of technology, but especially if you're trying to use it to teach in a blended environment, I would recommend that teachers have more than one way to do things, just in case the technology fails. It's much easier to transition if you have a plan B than if you weren't prepared for things like that to happen. Also be prepared to teach the students how to navigate the technology, how to be comfortable with it before they are given an assignment, I think is important. For the students, I would recommend that they learn to manage their time when it comes to working in the class, particularly in the blended environment, because many times when you just have a face-to-face, it is easier to identify that as being work time, but when you're outside of the face-to-face, it might be difficult for some students to allocate sufficient time to work on their assignments. Also, the students should take time to explore the technology, to play with it, to make sure that they're comfortable with it and that they can ask questions about it in case they run into problems when there are deadlines to be met. It's important that new students have a plan, that they get organized and plan ahead so that they can meet all of their deadlines as well. In my personal class, my blended environment is still very limited. Like I said, I wanted to start with everybody. I wanted to just blend all my classes, and then I decided that it might be best to just stick with one. So I have one of my classes where we have several activities that we complete online, and then others that we do face-to-face. But I think slowly my students are starting to think of it all as just one class, where before it was kind of just a separate thing that we did, and now it's finally becoming something that is part of our everyday things. The way that I've started working it is with the use of centers in my classroom, because I have found that I don't have a ton of success with trying to flip, where I have students maybe watch a lesson outside of class and then come to class and do the practice. So what I have found works best for me is to have them rotate around stations in my classroom, where a group will have the iPads or netbooks, and they will work either through Edmodo or other assignments that I give, and they are working in small groups individually, and then they will move to another center where they can sit in a small group with me for one-on-one instruction or clarification. The other two centers are just for additional practice. And so far, again, I feel like I'm just starting out, but so far it has been a pretty good way to run it. I wish I could have one-on-one technology, but we are not there yet in our district, and so with the limited amount of iPads that we have, this seems to work well. The feedback has been tremendous from those students, and even without asking them, I can tell that they are more engaged. We've had some problems with some students falling behind, but I would say that they are probably the same students who would fall behind regardless. And I would say that they recognize that there might have been a better way to prepare for, you know, the timing, or plan better for how they were going to complete their assignments. And in that sense, I feel like it's been successful. One thing that everybody really likes is having the ability to just ask a question online without necessarily emailing me, but sometimes they just post a question and they can actually get it answered if, maybe I didn't see it, but one of the other students might have seen it, and they can just talk to each other that way, which I think is kind of huge, at least for me, because they are starting to see Edmodo as another learning space, which is very, very nice. And so, speaking of Edmodo, my classroom, like I said, I don't have a whole lot yet. I've done things where maybe the students are just having a discussion. I will pose a question and then have them respond. I use this icebreaker activity here to actually categorize them for their new seating charts. Another thing that I really like about Edmodo is that you can filter your posts by assignment, or sometimes by quizzes, and so it's quicker, it's easier to view information. One thing that I have changed in my instruction is a lot of the smaller formative assessments I will be trying to do exclusively online, because the students can get instant feedback on their quizzes, and it's kind of really neat for me too, because I don't have to spend any time grading anything to see who didn't study their vocabulary or who's doing well with those kinds of things, and keeping up with the words, so that we can move onto using the vocab in the context with the grammar in the context of the chapters. So that's another thing I really like about Edmodo. You can see that I've set up all my classes, but I don't really have a whole lot in anything other than my Spanish 3s. Another thing that I've done differently is when I post things, for example, videos here, sometimes I will have them work in groups to watch videos. We were talking about how to write a good research paper, and so there were different components of it, and I just broke the students up into groups, and I had them work on watching the video and taking some notes and preparing a mini lesson to teach to the rest of the class. So everybody contributed their section of it, and I could not believe how engaged they were, and how much easier it was than me teaching all of it. They probably would have tuned out within 20 minutes, so that was exciting. If for my future classes for next year, I hope to continue to experiment over the summer and to come up with better lessons and ways to engage all my students. And I'm definitely going to continue to use Edmodo, as I believe this is probably the best way to go for my students, because they are comfortable with it and they have used it in other classes as well.